to our viewers that normally jump on this show or those that are watching the recording later. We'll get started in just a second. I like to listen to my music for just, another 5 seconds or so. I'm so proud of myself to have this and trying to make something a little bit part of my brand, which is, this is, by the way, this is Victorious Coffee is the name of this music, which is part of my coffee brand. Uh, so I think we've had
I
enough
like
of
that
that.
music.
You do, huh? Okay, all right.
It's a little slinky. It's a little slinky.
I'm getting, I've had my last three get. Well, I think I've just played it. Oh no, I've had it. I've had it maybe 4 or 5 times out of the eight show. This is the eighth show. I'm climbing up there. I'm getting ready to get into double digits. We actually, I think, you know what? I think, and I don't call this a podcast, by the way, um, but I think the average number of podcasts is only 8, I believe, and then they kind of run out of steam. So hey, welcome to like a critical moment in my live career here. And so,
Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, folks, I cannot tell you, and I know I say it every time. I'm so excited about this guest, but I am because it's people that I do get people that reach out to me about the show, but I specifically go out looking for folks, and it's folks that usually it's either folks that I have worked with, I think almost always, or have uh, worked with them on the periphery, and I just love what I see them doing. And this gentleman I'm bringing on today, I just, he is so calm under pressure. I don't think always, maybe not always, but whenever I'm dealing with him, he was always calm under pressure. And we had some hell of a couple of tough, maybe more than a couple of tough situations that were happening between us and between the organization we were working with. And we got through those things and remained to stay in touch. And so I'm so excited to bring Andrew J., the leader of leaders, to the call. And so, Andrew, it's good to see you, man. Come on and say hello. And it's good to have you on the call.
Victor, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on show number 8
Thank you.
and to see you again and talk with you in a format like this again, because our conversations are wide ranging and dynamic, that you as a person bring a dynamic quality to every relationship as well. And so, just for those that are listening out there, Victor's his persona on screen is the same persona off screen. And I appreciate both of that.
Yeah.
Both Victors.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's get it going. Let's get right into it. I want to try to keep this to 45 minutes if we can. And so why don't we start? I don't like going through folks' resume, but I would like you to sort of talk about your career progression, because knowing you and knowing part of your story, there's been some interesting, there's an interesting trajectory to where you are today. So take us through that progression. We don't need the whole, we don't need the whole ball of wax. People can go on LinkedIn and check that out. And then also anything that was sort of a critical move, point those out, and then that'll sort of frame up as we go into the rest of the questions for today.
So it's a great, we all come into the hospitality in different ways. And I grew up in a family where cooking was central to what we did as a
Mm,
family and with friends. And so my parents threw big dinner parties. And as a boy, I remember trying to join in on those parties, drinking coffee, trying to
mm,
sneak some alcohol on the side, but also serving at those parties as I got older. And that was a joy for me. And then fast forward, I was working in college while going to college and working in hospitality. I was working as a bartender and then later as a sommelier in San Francisco. I fell in love with beverage first and the art of hospitality as communicated through dining at a table. And I stayed in restaurants all through grad school. And then after graduate school, I started teaching high school. but still working at
Yeah, I
night.
remember that. Yeah.
And I taught high school for 4 years. 3 of those years for Los Angeles Unified Schools, and then a year in New Jersey at a blue ribbon school. Two very different experiences, but
Wow.
the thing about being a teacher is the thing about being a general manager. You have to stay curious and you have to keep learning from those that you are in charge of shepherding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's really very little difference there in terms of your responsibility to the people around you. And then in 2004, I committed to hospitality full time and became the general manager of the Ryland Inn in New Jersey, which was a New York Times four-star restaurant, the only one outside of Manhattan at that time. And that was a great honor. And by the end of my first year with Chef Craig Shelton, I ended up, because of his coaching and mentoring, going off to learn hotel.
Mm.
And so by 2006, I was working at a hotel as a director of food and beverage. And I haven't left hotels since that point. So it's been 20 years of hotel for me.
Wow.
And every day I'm at my hotel or even another person's hotel that I'm visiting, I'm in love with the environment and the people in that hotel.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. Wow. 20 years. That is a long time. And I actually thought by the way you carry yourself, I thought it was longer. It's just again to your ability to be that duck, just sort of smoothly going across the lake, but with things going like this underneath. And so I just think that's fabulous. With 20 years of experience, here's the first question. Looking back over that span,
Mhm.
has there been a moment that that impacted you then and has sort of carried how you lead today? Is there one particular moment that maybe an
In
experience
the
that
past
steps out
20
or a
years,
moment? Yeah.
well, there's so many because I've moved from food and beverage to general management, and each of those steps was important along the way. There's not a like a dramatic moment. I could say it was
Mm,
this moment that solidified that thank you for me. But I will say this, that management is cumulative, and so is our appreciation of the field within which we work. So the accumulation or aggregation of experience has been very meaningful to me. And I'm a different person today than I was yesterday as a general manager. But I take that lesson that I know to be true for myself and I speak about to the team. And I say to them, if Mr. Simmons comes in for a meal with us today, recognize his likes, his dislikes, but also know that he's slightly different. He's been changed from the
mm,
person you knew yesterday.
mm.
And aren't we all a little bit different the next day than we are the day we're in today?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. I like that. Yeah, I feel the same way. There's been a series of things, especially in our world, right? There's a
Right.
series of things that have occurred. So terrific to hear your perspective on that. So you were in these roles. You were you know running the restaurant. You became director of restaurants, director of food and beverage. P&Ls are getting larger and larger. Now you move to GM, big, much bigger scope, and people see a GM and automatically go, well, they've made it to the GM spot, very successful, but they don't
Right.
see the pressure that happens behind the scenes. So can you talk about that? What pressure or responsibility that people don't see that's happening behind the scenes, and has any of that changed the way you lead?
The pressure is ever present. You have to be comfortable under pressure to be a general manager. And most general managers, myself included, we are um, perfectionistic. We want our own operation, our own self, the work we perform to be exceptional in every detail. So we hold ourselves to a very high standard. And then, of course, we had the pressure coming upon us from brand, from ownership,
Yeah.
from team, as well as from guests. And one thing that has changed is the relationship between guests now and before COVID has shifted. And
Mm,
we speak about this at my role, my level. Social media has shifted the conversation that's happening from inside the hotel to a conversation that's ongoing and often outside of the hotel. And commentary that's being placed on social media is being picked up on by brands and by ownership and then coming back to you at the hotel. So you have a lot of dynamics that are different today than 10 years ago.
hmm hmm Yeah, and I think what I think is interesting about that, what I'm starting to see a shift, and I wonder if you've seen this, is I've seen a shift in multiple industries that are now taking team members from within an organization and making them the influencer because that is where the lane is these days, and having them be influencers. And when I think about the last company that I was in and our team members, there are some that you would love to be champions for you, and then there are some that are even high performers, but may be a challenge. And so, have you seen that in hospitality yet, where they're using that? Have you seen anybody doing that?
I have, there are it's unusual when you have someone inside your organization who is an influencer part-time and works for you at the same time. And I usually will leave it up to that person to decide how rigid that boundary is between the role they have with us and the role they portray themselves as when they're online. But
Hmm.
in some cases, and I think you imply this in your question, that role can be very beneficial for the brand that you work together with
Yep.
that person on. And I've seen that really help, especially when you can highlight programming at your properties, because programming is part of the narrative that we love others to know about at our properties.
Yeah.
And often influencers are specifically aware of that programming and then commenting upon it.
Yeah, yeah, great. Let me just take a quick look. I don't think we have any. We are live, by the way, we are live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube, and also on my Facebook page. And so, but questions should wind up here in the comments. So, those that are listening in, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. We love to get comments from those that are watching. Let's talk about leadership myths. So something that has happened maybe early on. Was there something that occurred that was a good lesson learned, and that has actually sort of channeled or sort of guided you moving forward?
One of my favorite examples for myself, I was working as a server in San Francisco for Chef Bradley Ogden and Chef George Marone, two
Mm,
big names in San Francisco dining. And Chef George was running the floor, and we went through a menu change. And I was working more or less full time at the restaurant called One Market with George, but I was going to college and it was in the middle of finals. And we went through that menu change. And during stand up, Chef George turns to me and asks me to name all the details of this menu item. And I try and fake my way through it. And he turns to me and he looks at me and says, you don't know this item, do you? And I said, no, chef, I'm sorry, I don't. And he said, well, I want you to know you let me down, you let the restaurant down, you let the team down, and most important, you let yourself down.
mm,
Get off my floor. Next time you're here, if you don't know the menu items, you're gone.
mm. Right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes. He hit me square right between the
Yeah.
eyes. And I knew I had screwed up. So at that point, I vowed I would know the menu or any menu change, to every detail possible. And of course, when I came back to my next shift, I was ready to go and I was desperate for Chef George to call me out. And he didn't. And so at the end of the stand-up, I go up to him and I say, Chef, why didn't you ask me about the menu item tonight? And he said, because you know them. I know you know them now. That was a great leadership lesson because then I thought about that. I said, okay, so what I'm learning here is accountability is wide ranging. Accountability is when it's healthy, it's accountable to the experience you're providing to your guests and to the team that you're a part of, as well as to the leadership of that team. But most of all, accountability, if it's going to be healthy, has to be inside the individual.
Yeah,
Because if the individual doesn't believe that accountability is important or necessary, they're unlikely to be accountable.
yeah, yeah,
And now when I have these conversations with team members, and ever since, when I was in a leadership position, both in restaurants and hotels, a common experience might be that an employee is chronically late. They can be otherwise a strong performer, but why is an employee chronically late? And so
yeah.
I take the similar tact. I'll sit with the employee and say, I want you to know that you are letting the guest down, you're letting me
Mhm.
down, but most importantly, you're letting the team down and yourself. And are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, yeah,
And usually that sits pretty squarely like it did on me, and often there's an immediate correction.
yeah. I have not heard a story like that. I've heard, and I often say, as a leader, the one of my styles is, and I say this, and you've been present where I have said, you want that person to walk out of the room going, I let Vic down, as opposed to you berating them and they go, what an asshole, right?
Right.
But I've not used that before, saying you've let yourself down, and I think that is super super. If I heard that, that certainly I would have taken that the same way. So I love that. Thank you for that. I'm putting that in my toolkit. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Um, let's see. Okay, I love this question. People versus operations.
Mm,
Let's talk about, um, where do you think hospitality leaders today? You talked about. It made me think of this. This is a standard question I have, but it made me think about pandemic, post pandemic, and
mhm.
some of the things we said, like in the early days of post pandemic. Oh, we've learned and about the human side of things, and we're
Right.
going to do things differently. And if you ask me, we just went right back to doing what we used to do, generally speaking.
Yes.
Not necessarily that, but in that style, in that theme of this context here, what do you think leaders miss when it comes to the human side of things and the human side of leadership? Where do you think there's a miss that happens a lot of times?
A couple ideas come to mind immediately. One is I think leaders return to bad habits, and you just talked about this. And one
Yeah.
of them is not defending your team when
Mm,
somebody from the public who's there in the property is acting like an asshole. So
mm,
I've changed my approach. I used to, it used to be the customer is always right or the guest is always right. And post COVID, I tell the team explicitly, I say, I have a no asshole rule. If somebody is being an asshole, we're going to 86 them. We're going to remove them from the ability to impact in a negative way the team and other guests because we're protecting the experience for each other and for other guests. And to me,
yeah.
that's a healthy way to do this. So that acknowledgement is a significant change, I think, for the better after COVID, because prior to COVID, we were reluctant to throw somebody out. I have seen it before, but it was rare and too often, too rare, to, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. It had to be super extreme.
Right. Had to be so extreme that it shocked somebody's
Yeah.
sensibility in a way that was really rattling. But, and then on the other side, I thought we were going to learn about the balance between work and someone's life outside
Yeah.
of work,
Yeah.
especially with managers. And that has not changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
If anything, the world is faster, and the demands upon time more consuming. And as an industry, we have to learn where to draw boundaries. Like, too often on LinkedIn and elsewhere, people will say, "Oh, well, I'll work the other, team." Or if you're not working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, you are not working.
Yeah.
And that mindset is so unhealthy. It leads to broken families, it leads to broken bodies, it leads to broken properties. And we can't develop or find profitability because we didn't create a labor plan that was accountable to somebody's time, not just at work, but outside of work.
Yeah.
And that's something we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I say this, I say this all the time. And it was something I learned early on. It had a tremendous impact on me as an emerging leader. And the HR director I was training under was at a staff meeting, and she told the leaders there that when you put your team members
Mm.
in a position of making a decision between life and work, what do you think is going to win out? And so I continue carrying that on. Now, I will say I added my piece to that, which is you'll get away with it for a while because people, they still want to keep making money and they need to take care of their family. But meanwhile, they're going to look for the next opportunity because life is still always going to win out. You might be able to get away with it, but not continue to do it. It's not sustainable and not good for us as an organization. So quit it, knock it off. So
I agree with you. I mean,
yeah,
it's not sustainable, and people will leave the organization. But this is part of the conversation we need to have as well on the ownership side and in conferences where owners gather,
yeah,
which is to say, people are not expendable, people are not fungible. We need to be able to take care of those that work with us and for us as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that just we will move on, but I think that conversation still needs to be had at the ownership level more and more recently. I think
Mhm.
so. For those that are listening, owners, it's not sustainable. Yes, your bottom line is going to look good, but it will not. Eventually, you're going to get it in a situation where you're going to turnover kills you. That's the other thing I'll say on my soapbox is if we put turnover on the P&L, owners would start paying attention and start we everybody would start working on that number if turnover was really on the P&L. It never I've yet to see it ever on a P&L. So that's what I do when I'm consulting is figure out the number, do the math, and then get it on your P&L. And you will be surprised how many people will make sure that your retention goes up and your turnover goes down. So
I love that. I'm going to push for that, Victor.
awesome. Okay. So we've talked about some hard and messy moments, but here's the question I have. Is there a particular practice that we haven't touched on yet or a mindset that consistently helps you show up for your teams?
Well, not unlike yourself, I saw a commitment to work ethic from my parents,
Mm,
who were both extremely hardworking. And I think that that is a virtue that I carry on, is this idea that,
yeah,
hey, I I I hope to model that for my children, and for others in my, that I'm friends with, and at the company, of course. And that helps me show up. The other thing, and
mm,
this isn't mentioned enough, you have to have a sense of humor
mm,
when the crap is flying, because if you don't, you will not make it out in a healthy way. You have to
yeah,
understand pressure, and you speak about my being calm under pressure, and I mostly am calm under pressure, but I sometimes will poke myself and make light of my own situation internally or even externally. I'll be self-effacing in front of my team so they know that I don't take myself so seriously that I'm afraid to show them my vulnerability.
Yeah.
And you have to be choosy about these moments, but that's a big part of it too, is finding humor in dark moments and moving through it and finding resiliency through work ethic and friendships you make along the way. And I think that's a big part of it. But the joy I have of providing hospitality to others on my team and then to our guests and the neighborhood we're in, that has always been a part of my personal reason for being
Yeah.
in this field and continues still decades later.
Yeah, that's definitely part of your brand for sure. For sure. I haven't asked this of others, but it because I remember walking by with you on the way to dinner, and we passed right by your daughter's apartment. So how are your kids doing? You don't have to give me any of the personal details, but in generally speaking, kids are doing okay.
They're doing great. So I have two children. A son is 26, daughter is 24. My son is in the final stages of the process to join the California Highway Patrol.
Wow, wow.
And my daughter is working in hospitality at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel at the front desk as part of
Oh
that
my
team.
gosh, that's another segment right there.
Yes, it is. Those of us that have children or relatives that work in hospitality, either with us or at one point, near us.
Yeah, yeah. My daughter is working for a entertainment company on the in the inclusion space, and man, just the conversations that we have, it's a very prideful moment. So wonderful to hear that's going on with you as well. Uh, let's see here. I've been getting texts, and let me just see if by chance this has anything to do with. No, okay, I don't think it has anything to do with the
I
show.
have a
So let's
question
go
for you,
on.
Victor.
Yes, go ahead.
In the next 5 years, when you look back, what do you want to say like was your biggest accomplishment at this point? Because now you're wise, you have enough leagues under your travels to say, hey, but you have a lot of time left in you. And 5 years from now, when you look back just at this period, what do you hope to say you accomplished?
That is a terrific question because, to be perfectly transparent, I've only been thinking about the last 2 years. Quite frankly, I said October of last year, I said I'm retiring. I said I'm retiring, but yet then I started writing books, and then I started
Yes.
embarking on doing a TED talk, and I started doing some fractional HR work, and everybody I had said I'm retiring, there's like, you're not retiring, you're still doing it. But I really am retiring, and what I want to do, the main purpose behind my books and behind the TED Talk, was to get my father's story out there.
Mhm.
And it's already out there. Everybody can see it on LinkedIn. This is not the show for this today. Excuse me. But really, 5 years from now is that there's a movie about my father. That's where I want to be. That I'm at. We've already finished the premiere, and that it's out, and that we're receiving the accolades of what my dad has done. That is really what I'm after right now at this point in time. So,
And he's certainly worthy of being the subject of that film. And you were you're an excellent writer. I enjoy reading your books and your
mm,
TED Talk too. I
oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ooh, warming my heart there, man. It's this is today is your day. All right. So let's bring it back to you. I just got, let's see, how are we on time? Okay, we're making good. We're doing good on time. Um, okay, let's talk about a leadership truth that you've learned the hard way. So similar question, but slightly different. So
Mhm.
something that you had to learn the hard way. You wish someone had told you told you earlier. So what would that? Is there something that you can pinpoint?
You never know your numbers deep enough,
Mm,
and you can think you know them, and it's tough. And every owner and every VP within a brand will have a different way to look at the numbers. And so the truth is, one, you have to know your numbers, but two, you have to know the audience.
oh, that's great.
And you, everybody in positions that you report to in that field, which is wide, can view it, say, some individuals are very much comparing themselves year over year, some individuals month over month, some are have a sort of platonic ideal, like, oh, it should always be in this range only. Others are against the budget, and still others are against unstated goals. And the foundation of that is to know the numbers. And numbers now are voluminous and many. And it's so to save yourself some angst and agony, you have to understand the audience as quickly as you can, and then in future conversations be able to speak directly to that.
You want to drill down a little bit more? I feel like this was a conversation we had when I was at your property last year, but
Yes.
go a little bit deeper in that when you're talking about your audience. I want to understand. I'm not sure I'm
So
with
the
you on.
audience, for instance, in that hotel, it's about communication to a family that runs a hotel, and they're still learning the profession as well.
Mm, okay.
And so part of how you speak to that conversation and knowing number is also to give benchmarks and explanations as to benchmarks, and then to fill in details for your own property or properties if you're managing multiple properties. And then when you're working with brands, like I worked for, different brands over the years that are some are independent brands and some are worldwide brands. There are different, brands tend to be more straightforward on those, less iconoclastic. However, honestly, the best explanation I ever had to give, and I thought this was unusual. Looking back on it, it even seems to grow in my estimation. I worked for a real estate investment trust or a property that had been part of a trust, and it
Mm,
was in a core property, partly owned by BlackRock,
mm,
and very well-known real
yeah.
estate company. And the asset manager from BlackRock would come in, and they would come and ask you questions about the property, and they see scores of properties like your own.
Yeah.
So when they talk numbers, they are very knowing, of course, but they have a process that I think was very clear, and it's so easy to understand that I think it became clear and easy to understand because they dealt with so many properties. And that might be a strength
Yeah.
that they brought to the table when I look back upon it, is you knew the expectations, and you knew that each member of that team would have the same expectation and present it the same way. And that consistency is hard to find throughout the industry. So it
Yeah.
still goes back to what I'm saying generally, which is you have to know your audience, you have to know the number, you have to speak to number. And I say this too when I'm training people. Numbers tell a story. You have to be the one in control of your story, if at all possible.
Yeah. Yo, I totally get that. I can remember when I was with a management team, and host was the
Mhm.
was ownership group, asset manager, and they know their hotels, they know the hotels in the market, and so when the exec team is getting pushed, I mean, that is their role, is to get the maximum amount out of that hotel. And you got to understand, that they know what they're talking about. It's not that it's making your job harder; it's making you better because they are, in a lot of instances, were right, of what was happening,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
we needed to do better in that regard. So, okay, coming into the home stretch here. So Is there something that you hear leaders say publicly all the time, which is absolutely not the case?
That's my favorite question yet. That's great. Let me
Uh,
think about that. Is there something that leaders say all the time that you think is absolutely not the case?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In our industry, we've since I've been in the industry, people like to say, well, it's not rocket science or it's not brain surgery, as if what we are doing is not that complicated or complex
Mm,
or that important. And the lesson I took from COVID most of all is that there is nothing more important to good community and a good planet than hospitality.
yeah.
And it's because of our importance that we should actually walk with our head held higher and not say, well, we're not doctors, or we aren't changing the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wrong. We do change the world. We change it for the better at every single moment of the day that we are open. We provide a space for strangers to meet strangers and then become friends, and sometimes more than friends. And that happens because of hospitality spaces. So let's not give up our power. We are in a field that actually is a leader in providing meaning to the world.
Yeah. Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. It's great, great reminder. So I hope you all got that. Go back and rewind that and write that down. It's not brain surgery, right? And what we do a lot of times it is in comparison. And so when you have all of those factors and pressures and going all at the same time. So Andrew J, it was wonderful spending time with you, man. And listen, we will when we conclude here. Let's stay online for a couple minutes so we can catch up on a couple other things. I'm gonna just take a quick look. I don't think I see any comments. I'm gonna jump over to Facebook for. Usually I have it open, but I didn't have a chance to jump on. So let me just make sure I'm not missing any comments there. Okay, I think we are good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in or listening to our recording. And Andrew, it was a pleasure seeing you, man. Stay on the line though. I'm
Of
gonna
course.
end the
Victor, thank
stream
you
here.
for having me. And it's an honor.
All right. Thanks everybody.